herself. So did Santa. Alright, I got it. Let's get started then. What do you say we split into two teams? Lotus and I will search the Earth one, so you two can search the Saturn, alright? Sounds good. Junpei handed the Earth key to Santa. They decided that their initial search should be brief, only 10 minutes. They'd meet back near the staircase once they were done. Junpei and June headed for the elevators. Sure enough, there was a card reader bolted to the wall next to the left elevator. He lined up the Saturn key and swiped it through the reader. A light on the upper left corner blinked to life. Great. Looks like it's working now. Alright, now how do I call the elevator? There was a single button to the right of the elevator door. On the button was the upside down triangle, the universal symbol for down. There didn't appear to be an up button. Junpei pushed it. He didn't have much of a choice. Oh, that's a scary looking elevator. It opened. Look, Junpei. June's voice was excited, but Junpei could hear a tingle of anxiety. Sweet, it opened. Let's get going. He grinned at June and stepped toward the door. I was about to step foot in it, he felt a hand on his arm. Wait. What? I'm not really, I just... Oh gosh. Junpei was at something of a loss. What could she possibly be so frightened of? June was probably afraid of being locked up alone with a boy. They could only go down. I'm actually going to say being locked up alone with a boy. Seems to be going that way. After a little, he thought Junpei decided she had to be nervous about being locked up in a small space alone with a boy. In a way, it was kind of cute. Very demure, you could say, he thought. Still, even though it wasn't exactly roomy in the elevator, they weren't going to be pressed up against one another. At least, they didn't have to be. Still, it was making her nervous. Junpei couldn't help but think how innocent she was. Come on, let's go. Again, he stepped toward the elevator. And again, he felt himself restrained. What's a problem? I said, wait a minute. Why? Aren't you afraid, Junpei? Afraid of what? Well, I've never, you know, she'd never been in an elevator with a man alone before. Even so, she still seemed awfully alarmed. I might get wet. Okay, the first thing sprung to mind, self-explanatory. Didn't actually think that the lower decks were flooded. Completely forgot about that. What? Down there, I'd get soaking wet. Well, I mean, of course, you would. That's the way it works. I mean, I've never heard of anyone getting soaking wet somewhere else. Oh my god, Junpei, stop talking. That's true. You don't mind? Mind what? Getting wet? Well, I don't know. I think I'd probably, you know, like it. Gosh, Junpei, you're so brave. Really? I mean, I kind of think any guy would do the same thing, you know? What happens, happens, right? If you get the chance, you just gotta go for it. That's what a man's supposed to do, I guess. You're so cool, Junpei. I really admire you. That doesn't really sound like the sort of thing you would admire someone for. I'm really scared. Yeah. I mean, like you said, you've never done it before. Yes. So I don't think I'll be able to last very long, and then it'll be over. This is the funniest part of the game so far. Over? Yes. I'll go to heaven. Heaven? It feels kind of like you're floating in space, and your mind gets all fuzzy, like when you pass out. At least that's what I've heard from people who've experienced it. Yeah, I've heard that too. Although I don't think the same thing happens to guys. What? Huh? But it would happen to men too, wouldn't it? It would happen to anyone. Once it gets into your body, the same thing happens to everyone. Well, I mean, usually it doesn't go inside the man. I mean, generally, Yes, it does. Well, eventually it will. It's not like you really have a choice. Your body will force you to swallow some of it eventually. What are you trying to do to me? Nothing. I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm just saying that's what happens. It's a psychological reaction to what you're experiencing. Was that really how it happened? It occurred to Junpei that perhaps that was how it worked. Perhaps he'd been mistaken all these years. Had he misunderstood life so gravely? The thought terrified him. Jun seemed to be entirely oblivious to Junpei's mounting confusion and terror. I know most men probably have larger lungs, but even then I don't think you could hold your breath for 20 or even 10 minutes. Eventually you'd have to breathe and the water would get into your lungs. Once that happens, your body won't be able to get oxygen anymore, and you'll start to feel that floaty feeling as you pass out. Haha, haha, ahahaha. Finally, Junpei understood. He understood what June was trying to say and why she was so scared. Yeah, you're right, you wouldn't last very long. See? She was afraid that the only elevator button pointed down. That meant, of course, that the elevator couldn't go any higher than the floor they were on. As he thought about it, Junpei realized he hadn't seen elevators on A or B decks near the central staircase, all of which meant that the elevator could only convey them to the lower decks. And the floor below the one they were on, D deck, should be completely submerged. That meant... Hey, wait a minute. This elevator came up from somewhere under us, right? Well, yeah, I guess it did. It didn't open right away after you pressed the button. There was a motor noise like it was moving, and then it opened. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So take a look inside. Junpei jerked his head toward the interior of the elevator. It's not wet. It's not wet at all, is it? The walls and even the floor are totally dry. Well, it looks really... While it does look watertight, it also looks airtight. Maybe it'll last never very long. Oh, you're right, they are. She looked around the elevator, slightly embarrassed. Well, let's test it. Test it? Yeah, watch this. Junpei put one foot in the elevator and bent around the corner of the door until he could see the floor buttons. There were only two, E and C. He pushed the E button and jumped out of the elevator. The door slid shut and they heard the grinding of the motor as the elevator car moved down. A few moments later, they heard the sound of the elevator door grinding open several floors below. Junpei nodded to June and pressed the elevator button again. A few moments later, the elevator returned. The door slid open, and just as Junpei had expected, there was no water to be found. See? Junpei couldn't resist puffing out his chest just a little bit. June, however, still looked confused. What does that mean? How can the E-deck be safe if the D-deck is full of water? Well, here's what I think. The elevator shaft and E-deck must be watertight and separated from wherever the ship's been punctured. Here, let me show you. He pulled out his notebook and pen and sketched out a rough illustration. See? So, is that why the ship hasn't sunk? The shape of the inside keeps it from all filling with water? Yeah, I think that's what's going on. Junpei continued talking as he closed the notebook and slipped it back into his pocket. So I'm gonna go down and check it out. You stay here, alright? But... Come on, just do it, alright? He gave June's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, then hopped into the elevator. He pushed the E button, and the door began to close. June looked worried, her eyes darting back and forth as if she was trying to make a decision, when suddenly... And I'm going to leave it there. Because I like to do my sets in like just 1 hour, so we can get like a few sets and stuff going. And it's much easier to edit that way as well, and I've kind of gone over a little bit, but yeah, this is really interesting. Like, elevator is going down to the floor, but maybe he only maybe wants to make it look like it's flooding by flooding a certain area, maybe. So he wouldn't exactly... but then again, the window did actually break open, didn't it, at the start of the game. I was thinking he wanted to do it just certain controlled areas so he wouldn't actually ruin his ship. But, really interesting. But I just wanted to stay with Lotus to keep an eye on her, because I haven't trusted her for a while. But, yeah. And that conversation about getting wet and stuff, that was... I just can't believe neither of them clicked. But yeah, I'm very interested to find out what happens when suddenly. So, until next time, catch you later.